Hey everybody, welcome to this week's version of DevOps Derek. I'm DevOps Derek, or also known as Derek Campbell, and today we have Paul Broadwidth from Chocolatey. Hey Paul, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Derek. How are you?
I'm good. It's a bit hot in Scotland for once.
It's yeah, we were talking about that just beforehand. It's very, very warm. Clammy, as we say, I think.
Yeah, it's sticky.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, things are good. Things are good. Just back from a dog walk. Obviously, some problems last night. Unfortunately, we didn't stream last night. Obviously, we were due to stream last night. However, what happened was my internet went down. And that went down for about 8 hours. So unfortunately, couldn't actually get to that. But Paul, thankfully, was free this evening as well, so we jumped on. Today, Paul, we're going to be using a little bit of Octopus. Obviously, I work at Octopus Deploy as part of the advisory team. We're going to be talking about Azure ARM templates, and then we're going to be talking about Chocolatey. And you happen to know Chocolatey pretty well, Paul. Tell a little bit
Just
about
a
what you
little
do.
bit. Yeah, just been using that for a couple of weeks now. So yeah, no, I've been using Chocolatey for a number of years now. So yeah, it should be good.
Excellent, excellent. So you actually work at Chocolatey?
Chocolate's one of my clients. Yeah, I'm a freelancer, so Chocolatey's one of my clients. I've been working with the Chocolatey team now for about 2.5 years. So yeah, and as I said, I've been using Chocolatey itself for, I'm trying to think now, probably 4 or 5 years I've been using Chocolatey now, and free and open source and the business version. So yeah, a lot of experience with Chocolatey. PowerShell as well, been using that for, I looked at it before actually. I found some old PowerShell stuff I'd been doing. It was from it was like 10 years ago. I didn't think I'd be using PowerShell for any length of, close to that. So I've been using PowerShell for a long time as well. And PowerShell and Chocolatey go well together. So yeah, it's a match made in heaven.
Awesome, awesome. So obviously, let's maybe start with just for people who don't know, what is Chocolatey?
Chocolatey is it's best described as the package manager for Windows, but the way I kind of describe or give people an introduction to is a lot of people use Macs or they've used Linux, so they'll know what a package manager is in that sense. So Homebrew for Mac, and you've got about 1,000 different package managers for Linux, but apt. What's the other one? Yum, Pacman. They're the kind of popular ones that people use in the Linux world. So they manage software. So if you want to install some software onto your Linux machine, you use apt, Yum, etc., as I mentioned. Excuse me. And for Homebrew, you would do the same. So traditionally, Windows people didn't have that. We would download an installer, click next a bunch of times, accept some license agreements, blah, 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 and then you'd have some software. And then once you want to update that, you do the same thing again. Chocolatey allows you to install that from the command line silently and automated, so that, one command, Google Chrome's the one I always kind of use because everybody really knows what it is. Choco install Google Chrome, off it goes within a minute or so, depending on how long it takes to download Google Chrome, of course. You have Google Chrome on your machine without doing anything else other than that command. So that's really what it does. But it doesn't just install software. I call them payloads. Anything you can put into a package, like license files, registry keys, Chocolatey can actually deploy that to your end machines.
Yeah, because you can actually you can search for it, so you can actually download straight from the Chocolatey website, and that's what Choco install does, doesn't it? It just automatically goes in, so you can say, like you said, Google Chrome. So
Yeah.
you'll see here, obviously, these are we've actually got the Google Chrome, so it is just Choco install Google Chrome.
Google
Obviously,
Chrome, yeah.
yeah, and you want to probably append -y to then so that it doesn't come up. So that's just something.
Yeah,
Something to
you
be aware
can.
of.
Yeah, that'll prompt you to say, "Hey, I'm going to run some PowerShell scripts here," and the PowerShell scripts install the Google Chrome, and it's basically a warning. Hey, I'm going to do this thing. Do you want to continue? So yeah, you can add -y onto the end, or you can actually, there's a feature in Chocolatey, you can do it globally, so you never have to add -y. You just turn that feature on, and it never prompts you again.
Yeah, and most enterprises tend to write their own ones because they'll normally have like things like license files included. Because I actually used to write Chocolatey packages. There's one time I was writing a particular well-known backup agent, and I was writing it to. So there was like 3 separate locations. So site 1 backed up to site 2 to site 3, etc. So you had to add in some configs so that do some location-based lookups and install it from there. So there is actually a business edition, and you can also use your own NuGet package repository as well, and it's generally preferred, isn't it? Particularly when you're working at enterprise level and got lots of packages to install.
Yeah, that's what we recommend. Organizations set up their own internal package repository. So it's really it's a two-way thing. It's first of all, organizations are going to be downloading a lot of packages, because they're going to have a lot of end machines on there. So we recommend that to help the Chocolatey community repository not kind of go under a great deal of load, because they are doing that. They set up an internal repository, but it also helps them, because it reduces their bandwidth. If everything's inside their organization, it means that they don't have to reach out to the internet every time they want to install a package. Like Google Chrome, for example, you've got to download the Google Chrome package, and then you've got to go to Google and download the Google Chrome installer at runtime. As an organization, you don't really want to be doing either of them. You want to just be doing it within your own LAN, or maybe even a WAN if you're a multi-site organization. So that keeps it all in there as well.
It's funny, before I used Chocolatey, I used to use Ninite.
Yeah.
And this was great, but see, honestly, now when I look how cumbersome it is, because it was something I had to do, spin up that laptop, go in, check everything. And I remember discovering Chocolatey for the first time, and I was like, what is this magic? And obviously since then, I don't think I've been on this website for probably about 5 years now.
The big thing about Chocolatey is that we've just a couple of months ago hit our 1 billion downloads. So since Chocolatey's started, which was back in 2011, it's not something that's just appeared last week. It's been around for a long time. We've had 1 billion downloads. If you scroll down a little bit, Derek, on that webpage, you'll see those numbers come up as well. So there they are there. So just over 1.1 billion total community package installs. There's 8,035 unique packages. And of them, there's over 100,000 of those versions of those packages as well. That's larger than any other package repository for Windows that you'll find. So you've got Ninite there. There are other ones as well, but there's none that come close to the number of packages that are actually on there.
Well, surely about 80,000 of those versions are just for Chrome. I was looking at it today, and I think Chrome's on version 85.103.17.1.-A alpha release. But yeah, just obviously to make you aware, there is actually a webinar coming up on the business value of modernizing your Windows infrastructure and bringing Linux and Windows team closer. That's quite a long webinar name. But
that is...
Yeah, definitely check that out. And also, Paul and I actually did a webinar recently. That was just at the end of July. But yeah. Right, so let's jump in. Obviously, check that out on YouTube. That's on youtube.com/Octopus Deploy. It's called, actually, I'll just show you it.
That highlights another good point, actually, Derek, is that Chocolatey works with a lot of other products, other tools. So it works really well with Octopus. You've got Puppet webinar coming up there. We work closely with Ansible. So a lot of these configuration management tools and also deployment tools, things like SCCM as well and Intune. But it worked really well. Our demo worked really well with Octopus as well. And after that, I did those step templates, put all those step templates together for Octopus as well. So it covers all the main Chocolatey features you'd want.
Yeah, and we're using that. So this is the webinar that we ran about 6 weeks. How time flies.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, definitely check it out. So as well as that, what we're going to be doing, there is going to be a little bit of Octopus involved today. So I am going to take you over. And with Octopus, we're also using ARM templates. So what are ARM templates? ARM stands for Azure Resource Manager. And what that basically does is it's a way for you to work with JSON configuration and actually use infrastructure as code. So what we're going to do today is actually spin up a virtual machine from scratch. And then after that, we're actually going to install a whole bunch of Chocolatey packages. So there's something. What we're going to do is you jump in. We've got this the create Windows dev machine. So the premise here is you need a developer machine. You want to spin it up, and also you can do this every day as well. One of the main benefits here is it's really reusable. What I'm going to do just now, I am actually just going to kick this off because it does take some time. And obviously what I'm going to then do is talk you through the configuration, and then Paul will jump in and chat some of the chocolate stuff. So what I'm doing just now is I'm going to select run. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dev machine in development. So Octopus has this concept of runbooks. Runbooks is something that you can use to spin up infrastructure, do emergency tasks and whatnot. There's lots of stuff out there, but certainly have a look at it. But I use it a lot for spinning up infrastructure. Let's jump in and have a look at this, and just we'll see here. So from here, we'll go into the process. So this is actually a mix of Azure CLI, a bit of PowerShell, and then throw in some ARM templates as well, because you've got to love lots of different ways to do stuff, Paul.
Yeah, let's keep things really wide and use as many tools as possible. But then it gets you that experience as well that you can use in other projects.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because you can't, like PowerShell, like there's certain things that I really use, like PowerShell for, loops, testing. I'm a big fan of the AZ CLI. I did a session on it. It was my first one, actually, my first DevOps, Derek. I'm a big fan of it, mostly just because it's really straightforward. I also like AZ interactive mode as well, because it effectively writes it for me. So obviously, certainly check that one out. It wasn't the best one; it's my first one. So what we've got here is some PowerShell. So what we're going to be doing here is we're specifying some variables. We're then checking to see if a resource group exists, and we're then using, obviously, if we're not, we're running some. So we're creating a new Azure resource manager resource group, and then specifying this as Octopus variables. And the next step, so this is just something to be aware of, that you can use CLI. And then at this point, it's then going and checking, it's checking Octopus. The main reason is it would then need to add into the infrastructure tab. Now, the fun bit. This is where the Azure Resource Manager. As ARM templates are fantastic. What I would say is there are other ways to do this as well. You can use Terraform as well. And for those, you can also use the user interface with Azure. So what you've got here is ARM template. So we're specifying some parameters here where we've got the admin username, the password, DNS label prefix, the public IP name, virtual machine name. You can't. One thing I would say is if you're going to create this, what I'm a big fan of actually going in and creating them on the actual user interface, and then exporting the template at the end of it. So you can see here there's some reference to Choco apps, because what we do is you can actually install Chocolate applications without using Octopus as well. So you could use like the custom, obviously the post provisioning scripts. So you could actually just pull that down at the end. But what we're doing here is actually using Chocolate at the beginning to install the Octopus tentacle. So what we'll do here, we're specifying the Windows OS version as well. So obviously you see here we can select a whole range of Windows. So there we go. We've got some the VM size. So obviously we're going to be spinning up a different one than this. So I think it's a DS2. And then we're specifying the location. And then what we're doing here is we're specifying some variables, such as subnet reference, address prefix, all that sort of good stuff. And then some storage accounts. As you can see, there's quite a bit to it. Obviously, things like the default network security. In this instance, what I'm doing is I'm going to be showing you what it is at the end of today. So we're opening 3389. Obviously, by default, you probably want to close that. But this is just something just to make it, and also we're specifying the Octopus port as well. So we're then coming in and specifying the virtual networks. And then just as we're getting towards the end, what we're actually then doing is specifying some bits at the end, and then we're actually going to be using a gist file that will actually bootstrap and run the tentacle using Chocolatey, which is really cool. Okay, so one thing that I like to use is GitHub, Azure, and then the quick start templates. So I use this. I use this way more. Like, for instance, one of my favorite one is the SQL. I think it's there we go. Azure SQL. Let's see. SQL DB. It's one of the ones you can actually use Azure SQL and a database all in a single step. So definitely something to check out on GitHub is github.com/Azure and then Azure-quickstart-templates. So lots of great stuff. You can also, for instance, in that Azure portal, let's just go in. So what you can do is create a resource here. So say, for instance, you want a SQL Windows server. Yeah, let's go and let's just do cloud. There we go. So you can do, say, test VM for Derek. Let's just select all the Derek. And then just so you can see this. So this will be Azure test VM for Derek. And then so say, there we go. So you can go to review and create, and then select this little button down here, which says download a template for automation. You'll see here, so you can get all your configuration areas. So you can get your result. You see your resources that you're specifying, the variables, and then the parameters that you're actually. You can select deploy or download, or even add to library, which actually adds it into the automation account. So that's something to be aware of. So what we've got now is some parameters. So these are actually, we've created these as Octopus variables, things like the admin username, password, DNS prefix, etc., VM name. I'll see here if you come in and have a look at variables. I am using Octopus for this. The main reason is it's something I'm most familiar with, obviously working at Octopus. So you can, like, for instance, there's the VM location. We've got obviously the resource group name, so we should see one called dev VM dash dev or dash prod, etc. Some VM roles, the size that we're using, the username, Derek, obviously nice and original. Obviously, I've just probably told everybody my default username, but then it probably is. So obviously some whitelist IPs, and then you'll actually see if you come back here. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But at this point, we then need to get the IP of. So we've defined the parameters. We've defined the ARM template. We've got the source for getting the IP address. Again, this is some AZCLI, and then we're waiting for the machine. That's just to wait for it to provision, and then we're then registering the tentacle within Octopus. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here that we're doing. We've got API keys, VM names, URLs, space IDs, etc. What that's doing is from the worker, it's actually calling back to Octopus to add the virtual machine that you've just created back into Octopus to then be able to use it for your Chocolatey task, for instance. So there we go. So we've got all this. We've got our ARM templates, our AZCLI, some Azure PowerShell. I just need some Terraform, Paul, and then we're covering all the bases here.
I think so. You could maybe just throw a configuration management in there as well, some Ansible.
Why not?
Just to complete, just to complete that. That's what I've been working on today. So I've got plenty we could just throw in there, and
Ansible's super powerful. It was something that I've used it, but very not in any sort of great anger. It is a great platform.
I mean, looking at the ARM template that you were showing earlier on, you know my views on ARM templates. I think they're for masochists, and they're not really for people to create. I think, as you said, the best way of doing it is really creating the VM in the portal and then exporting that out and using that. That makes perfect sense. But I've been creating virtual machines today on Azure using Ansible, and it's basically a couple of lines of code. And just looking at the difference between the ARM template and that, obviously the ARM templates are far more powerful than what I'm doing. So you can do all sorts with the ARM template. I'm just spinning a VM up and getting, creating a neck and all that kind of basic stuff. But it was amazing the small number of lines that it takes just to do that in Ansible. It's a tool that I'm really starting to enjoy working with.
I can see that's the thing. Like with there's other tools out there that do seem to make it a little bit easier. The thing is, though, it's like ARM templates can be super easy. Like, for instance, that one there that was quite a big one. But like, for instance, I have another sample I use, and that spins up 3 or 4 web apps on a couple of databases, Azure SQL, etc. And that's actually like some of them are like 50 lines of code, which seems like probably quite a lot, but I've saw ARM templates like in the thousands of lines. But that's also when you're getting very specific about everything. That's like SQL clusters. Obviously you're adding lots of different types of storage, specifying like D drive, E drive, etc. So it can be pretty, if you're doing something like platform as a service, it's fairly straightforward. Once you get into VMs, there's so much more you can configure. Because that's it,
I was going to say, I think at that size you were talking, hundreds, thousands of lines of code. You're not building what I was talking about there. I'm building a couple of VMs. You're building an entire environment there. So back-end infrastructure for, as you mentioned, a web app or something like that. And you can do that all within one file. So
yeah, see, that's it, because you've got things like this where you can actually add in. So you can use predefined variables, right? But you can also then add in one that you can select. Like a few different options for as well. Like I actually use Runbooks to also build everything in my own personal cloud and also my Hyper-V box as well, and that is really powerful. So we're getting to almost interest bit where you can jump in a little bit more. But what we've then got now is we have a runbook step within a runbook. Obviously, we love a bit of layers within IT. So what this is as we're switching context, we are at the moment we're at the Azure level we are using the Azure Service Principal to authenticate, do all this on Azure Cloud, and then it's then going to run a runbook, and then it's going to switch context because it's then operating at the virtual machine because you've added the tentacle, right? So you've got everything now. At this point, you're then going to run a virtual machine, another one. And in this one, we're going to install a bunch of dependencies. So we actually see here, so we can see, we can actually see that this is already running in dev. This is the one that's running in live. So obviously I'm talking more than expected. That's not like me. Obviously I'm normally is what we've now got is the process. So this is the next one. What this is doing, this is Paul. You actually wrote this one. Obviously you've wrote a few recently, and you wrote these steps 1 and 4, which is quite cool.
Yeah, well, to be fair, the steps 1 and 4 were already there, but they weren't following best practice, and I kind of tweaked them a little bit. I can't remember what I added in, but they were already there. But yeah, that effectively what they do is they'll install a Chocolatey package and make sure Chocolatey is actually installed for you, so you can do it all kind of in one step.
Yeah, so it's quite cool that actually that you've got this. So what all this is doing is it's just if you go to, for instance, I won't lie, this is something installed. There we go. See, you see, it's already so one of the things to install Chocolatey, you come in and then it's funny, right? I've been on this. I should have just like copy this and store it anyway. But what you can do is you can use command or PowerShell, and then just do your so yeah, if you just basically run this, this is what that Octopus deploy step is effectively running. So that's cool. So let's jump over. So this is just checking, and because it's a dev box, we're going to be. This is effectively a virtual machine that will run in Azure. Oh, sorry, Azure. I do. You just see here what I've got is I'm installing IIS and some dependencies as well. Obviously, as you can imagine, there's some bits here that you need to enable. Then what I'm doing is afterwards is I'm deleting the default website because I don't know what it is. I just dislike having a default website. So this is your magic, Paul. This is something I have really enjoyed using since you updated it. So can you talk about a few of the improvements?
Yeah, when that step template, the way it was prior to me touching it with the updates for the kind of PowerShell code updates, and what it really done was it allowed you to install, I think it was just one package at a time. So you've got there, as you can kind of see under the Chocolatey -install package, you've got required package name. Now, you could only add one at a time, so it was multiple steps. So I added in that you could actually just add multiple packages on the command line and just separate them with a space as you've done there, Derek. So that's kind of one step now. I also added things like we've got all the other things underneath to do with the version, and that's actually disappeared from my screen.
Sorry about that. I had.
There we go. Things are coming back.
Let's just get that back up. So yeah, on you go.
There we go. So yeah, so you could add a package version now, but that will apply to all the packages on the command line above it. So because it would be strange if you said, yeah, I want one version of .NET FX you've got there in .NET Core, make it way too complicated. So that version applies to everything on the line. So if you want to install a specific version, you're probably better just having one package name, but you can do that now. You've also got cache location. That was there before. I also added package source. It was somebody that actually asked for that. I thought it was a good idea anyway, but somebody had actually asked, hey, what if I want to take a package from our internal package source within their organization? So maybe they've got some legacy apps there and they want to take it, as I said, from a particular source. They've got Artifactory or Nexus or some other repository manager. So that you can add that in now as well, and it'll pull the package from there. If you don't add that in, it pulls it from chocolatey.org. Disable download progress. I know that you love seeing the percentage numbers in your logs, Derek, when you're doing any of that stuff, but it makes the logs absolutely huge. So, but that's the way it's always been. So that's the way it's been left. But if you want to turn that off, you just tick that box. And finally, other parameters. So the Chocolatey is a whole host of parameters you can add. So I didn't want to just have the step template and then you can only do these things. What if you wanted to do something different? You then need to go dive into PowerShell. It just seemed a bit pointless. So I just added that. If you want to add additional parameters, we've got there, ignore package dependencies, and we've got require checksum. So if you want to just add them to the command line, just add them in there, and it'll add them on to when Chocolatey's running it, it'll add them in as well. So that was, I added, I don't know how many there is there. There's 2 of them that were there before, package name and cache location. The rest of them I added. 5.
You've got 5 there. And one thing, if you're doing this for an enterprise, please use your internal package repository. Obviously, Chocolatey is an open source application. There are obviously paid for versions, but obviously you don't want to DOS it, because friend, I've done it. Obviously, Paul, I've had to reach out to you. I got a bit too excited. I was spinning up VMs and I was installing all and then I was like, oh, wait a minute. And then I came back, and obviously, if obviously you can get rate limited, and that's fair enough. Obviously, I've saw that you see it on Twitter sometimes the website goes down, and it'll be people ham on the website. So just if you're doing this at home, great, use that. If not, definitely use your own repository, because obviously a lot of the internal stuff, like for instance, like you can in the webinar, you install SQL. We haven't done VS Code and SQL this time. The main reason is just the length it takes to install. It is only about 25 minutes in total from spinning up the infrastructure, which and then adding in the Chocolatey packages. But for instance, SQL edition, you'll probably want licenses, etc. What other benefits, Paul, do you get with your own, obviously, writing your own packages and using the Chocolatey for Business?
Yeah, so Chocolatey for Business, we Chocolatey free and open source version, Chocolatey FOSS, we call it. Like all open source projects, it's a bit more DIY, a bit more hands-on. You want all the fancy stuff, you build them yourself. That's really what the tradition of open source is all about. So Chocolatey for Business, a lot of people are not aware that there is a Chocolatey for Business version, and we have been providing that for quite some time now. And what that does is it allows organizations to be able to use Chocolatey internally, and it gives them, and rather than writing those DIY bits, we've done it for you. So a couple of the features I like to call out for Chocolatey for Business. The first one's Package Internalizer. We've talked so far about organizations having their own internal repository. Well, what Package Internalizer will do is, rather than you having to write those packages from scratch and put them into your own internal repository, it'll actually bring down the packages from the chocolatey.org, the Chocolatey Community Repository. Again, let's use that example of Google Chrome. It'll bring down that Google Chrome package. It'll look to see where it's downloading the binaries from, the Google Chrome.msi file or the exe file. I think it's an exe that's inside Google Chrome. Could be wrong. And it'll then bring that down as well from Google, put that inside a package, and that's then a completely portable package that you can push up to your internal repository and have your nodes consume that package as and when they need to, and they'll get that that software installed without reaching out to different places. So that's a really, really good feature. If you wanted to do that yourself, and you can manually download a package, change your URLs, download the bit, you can do all that. Probably take you 10 minutes, maybe 15, depends how quick you are at packaging. The Package Internalizer, depending on how quickly it can download the binaries, of course, we'll do that between 5 and 10 seconds, excluding that download time. So that's saving you a huge amount of time. If you've got 100 or 1,000 of those packages to actually internalize, how many man hours is that saving you? Just that one feature. So for me, that's an awesome feature. And so that's kind of main one I call out. The other ones, we've got things like we've got Package Synchronizer, an automatic synchronizer. And what that does is, if you install Chocolatey onto a machine that's already got software on there, for example, because not all Chocolatey is always installed onto a bare machine. You'll be able to bring those packages, software that's inside programs and features that are already installed, and bring them under the management of Chocolatey as well. And once they're under the management of Chocolatey, you can then upgrade them, uninstall them, and manage them just as you would manage any other Chocolatey package. We've also got Package Builder, which is a GUI. So Google Chrome again, if you right-click on the Google Chrome binary file, you can create a package from that file itself within about a few seconds. Again, you'll get a GUI up, you can type stuff in if you want, and then it'll actually create a package from that. And if it can't create a package completely from it, let's say the executable itself, sometimes they can be a bit strange because there are many, many, many different installer types on Windows. I think last count there was 22, different installer types. There's probably many more. Obviously, there'll be niche ones and all these. So Chocolatey copes with about 80% of those. It'll actually be able to work very well with them. The ones that can't do it completely, it'll create something called a to-do.txt file, and you'll get steps that you need to go through just to complete that package. So those are the kind of features I like to call out because they're most useful to organizations. But just to jump into something that you did mention about the Chocolatey Community Repository, it is a free resource. Organizations If you're down, you've got a lot more nodes than I've got at home or Derek's got at home. We're only downloading stuff onto a laptop, for example, and lots of people like us. That's absolutely fine, because that's what the community repository is all about. But as an organization, if you're downloading hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of packages from a Chocolatey community repository, you are taking away from that free resource that other people could be using instead. As an organization, you should really be looking at responsibly using that repository by internalizing those packages and having your own package source. And as a Chocolatey for Business customer, we've got an environment that actually allows you to do that, called Quick Deployment Environment, sets all of that up for you in a virtual machine, and you can then be able to use that internally within your organization, having Chocolatey Central Management on there. It's got Jenkins on there. It's got Nexus on there to allow you to be able to sort of plug that in and get up and running with Chocolatey very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. It's just about being fair with community resource.
Yeah.
You look at that 8.1 billion, and then you've got to think though there as well, Paul, how many of those then have then been downloaded and then deployed at another level. So you've probably 8.1 billion, but the real numbers are probably in the potentially in the tens, hundreds of billions.
Well, it was 1.8, not 8.1. So we're not
Sorry.
quite there yet.
Sorry.
Thanks for that, Derek, though. I really appreciate that. We will be 8 billion not long, because it's rocketing.
You think though, like if I used Chocolatey when I was a contractor, as well as before that, but I was writing Chocolatey packages, and their estate was in the 40,000 servers. So you think that's only one organization. If you think obviously there's no doubt hundreds of thousands of organizations using it, plus people. Cloudflare can only do so much.
I think it's Rob Reynolds, the kind of founder of Chocolatey, says a lot of the time that the packages you see on a community repository are only a very small percentage. I think the percentage he uses is there's 90% of packages that you actually never see because they're internal to organizations. So the Chocolatey community repository only represents really like 10% of Chocolatey packages that actually exist. The rest of them are all hidden away in organizations that they're using internally. Yeah. So it could potentially be that billions, 8 billion. That's, it's not a unfeasible number.
Yeah, and this is the thing is because you think not only is it happening like that, people who are cloud native and are tearing up or spinning up and tearing down infrastructure as well. That's something that might happen daily, multiple times per day. Like for instance, this is all fully automated. So if I'm spinning, I like spinning stuff up for dev test. Obviously, you don't do that you do it for production, but you then tear it down when load gets. And this is the thing is what this does do is it enables people to work easier, and also there's a high investment up front to get this working, but once you get it working, I can spin up as many VMs as I want in a couple of clicks. It's funny because we code then to then be able to click. So in this step we're installing full framework.NET, we're installing .NET Core, Google Chrome, VS Code, Kubernetes CLI, Kubernetes Helm, and then Docker Desktop. So you can do things like SQL. So you can do Developer Edition, SQL Express. You can also do full fat SQL, but obviously you need to write that with your own license file. So that's just something to be aware of. So this is all actually there, and it is great for once you've spun up and used ARM templates. If you're using infrastructure as a service, then it's absolutely key to use Chocolatey to then install and configure your applications.
Yeah. So, an additional step you could add if you were an organization, Derek, we've talked about that, organizations all night so far. So you could add in, your license file in there to Chocolatey as well. Just copy that file over and it just lights up all those extra features I've talked about.
Well, that's it. And that's the thing, because infrastructure, it's all about treating your infrastructure as cattle, not pets nowadays. Because that's it. I would normally set up a server and then it would sit there for the next 3 to 5 years. And that's probably on the, that's fairly low estimation. I know some servers that that were 10, 12, 15 years old. But that's hopefully they've went P to V, so that's physical to virtual. But yeah. So what we've got here is what we should see is if we come back to the overview. Computer says no. So it looks like we have a problem. Okay, that's fine, that's fine. So what it's done is at the end, we actually update Windows and reboot. It looks like we had an issue, but hey, let's not. Yeah, so it looks like something else was happening. Let's forget about that. It happens. This it's the first time this has happened though. So it's always when you're live. So what it's done is just want to see it ran for 18 minutes. So 18 minutes. That's installed Chocolatey. It's installed IIS. That's 5 minutes of it. And Chocolate only took 25 seconds. It's then deleted the default website. That lasts for 5 seconds. Installing the Chocolatey packages ran for 10 minutes and 28 seconds. So this installed a whole bunch of good stuff here. And then it was supposed to update and restart. It hasn't done that. So that took 18 minutes. And then also before that, we did provision. So let's have a quick look at the Create Windows Dev Machine. So development. So using the ARM templates, a bit of AZCLI, and then a bit of PowerShell. We ran this in 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 18 seconds. So that took 22 minutes, and that spun up a brand new server 2019. It installed a whole bunch of executables. It updated Windows, and it also installed IIS as well. That used to take what a few days. We've had this conversation in the past, and it's funny because obviously, this traditionally used to take 3 months. Like for instance, you would get someone would come and you request a server. You would then have to buy the physical server from Dell, HP, IBM, etc. And then you would have to, wait 2 months for it to be delivered, rack it, get an IP for the remote management, an IP for the OS, then, go and find a USB. Let's not talk about USBs because obviously we've had this conversation a few times. But like that, you would load the operating system and then you would then go and install your applications, which you used to then have to find from a network attached storage device or something like that as well. It just used to take a long time.
What's strange about it as well is when you speak, this makes me sound old, but when you speak to kind of younger people in IT, they don't believe you that it took that long. It's just like you're making up grandpa tales about nonsense that, in my day, but it did genuinely take sometimes 3 months, sometimes longer. It all just depended on the organization you worked in, how siloed they were, how busy they were, and a lot of IT teams just simply didn't talk to each other. It was all through forms, or if we've talked about the manila envelopes that went from tray to tray. I mean, these things did actually happen. And it did take this long for some things.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing is, so you can see there straight away that you've got Chrome. So I've actually just, whilst you're talking, I just RDP'd into the server. So what you'll see, and you'll need to see it, actually, let's just go full screen. You can see here that, let's just go system info. So original install date was the 15th of, it's in the US standard, which is back to front. Obviously, there's not a 15th month.
Wrong way
so
around.
that's day, months, year. Let me tell you off USA. Anyway, so 15th of September at 6:56 p.m. So obviously you can see this has only just been prepped. Everything here is good. So just want to prove. So you've got Visual Studio. You've got Google Chrome. And then let's do Cube CTL. So I did install Kubernetes command line. There we go. So we have obviously Visual Studio. And you can, I believe as well, you can install extensions as well with Chocolatey, Paul, can't you?
Yeah, you can. You can install Visual Studio Code extensions if they've been put up there. Yeah. The same with Visual Studio itself. There are additional, I want to say, bits. I'm not a Visual Studio user, so excuse my language when I say Visual Studio bits, because I don't know what they're actually called. Extensions, perhaps. Visual Studio extensions in Chocolatey community repository as well.
Yeah, so we've got Docker Desktop as well. So there's all the applications. Yeah, so there is no smoking mirrors here, guys. There's no smoking mirrors. And one of the things that I like, so we've got that up and running. Let's go back to Octopus, select Runbooks. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear down the VM. This is just specify development, select run. And there we go. Let's have a quick look at that one. Tear down. It's a great time to be alive, Paul. So this is just PowerShell script, and then running. This is just from memory. Yeah, this is just basically going in using some AZ CLI and then deleting the resource group. I'm a big fan of anything. Obviously, you can do things in incremental mode. I'm a big fan of each virtual machine being in its own resource group, so you can just clean up things. Resource groups in Azure are logical ways to contain things, and think of it as like a folder within a file share. It's an easy way to logically group things. You don't want to go in and see 100,000 folders, but you also don't want to go in and have one folders with 1 million documents. So try and find the balance there for your Azure resource groups. So what we should see is we are using this. We go back to Runbooks, discard changes, commit tasks. It's tearing down. So obviously it does take some time to do this. One of the things that I like, I'm a big fan of either turning stuff off using obviously you can't do it with ARM, but you can do it with PowerShell or AZCLI. You actually turn off your VMs. Just if, for instance, one of the things that you can do is turn it off at 5 p.m., turn it on at 8:30 a.m., depending on when you get into the office. And just that alone will save you something like 65%, if not more, on your hosting costs for your dev, test, and those non-prod environments. So yeah, that's so obviously that's just going to take that's going to come down, and that's going to finish off and delete everything in Azure. Thankfully, we're actually using Paul's resources as well, so I'm going to go and spin up another 10,000 machines, and Paul can pick up the tab.
That's no problem. I've just disabled your account, Derek. So
so yeah, so that's. I mean, that's the thing. You've got to love ARM templates. Chocolatey is fantastic for Windows. It used to be the bane of my existence, like installing application, like SQL Server. You know, you would get that bit of paper and you would have to go in and make sure that X amount of groups, you know, had been added. You can, you know, data drives have been added, backups are set in place. You can use all of this to configure it all. So you could use ARM templates to do a lot of the storage provisioning. You can use Chocolatey for installing SQL and also use custom configuration there as well. And then at the end, you get a nice, fresh virtual machine that's working beautifully for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point you mentioned as well, Derek, about the custom configuration. It's something we've started doing. If you're a Chocolatey user, you'll know about the package scanner, package verifier, package validator, all these kind of internal services we use. And we've used Chocolatey for them in the past, but what we've started doing is splitting that up. So we've got the Chocolatey, like package verifier is a classic example. We've got the package verifier service. So that's the software that it runs. And then we've actually got the configuration for package verifier in a different package, because then we can version that as we change the configuration. So we've got things like login in there. So we recently went from logging one file, I think it was 10 megabytes each, to one file a day. So rather than going, right, we need to change a config file, which then breaks the package because you've changed something, we've had a totally separate configuration file package. Now, and all that does is deploy a new configuration file. So we've got, so all of that is the way you can use Chocolatey. So don't just think about it as got to install software. You can actually configure your software with a Chocolatey package as well. And that's something you talked about in our previous webinar about the backup agent package
Yeah.
that you were writing. So you can actually have the backup agent as a package that can be installed everywhere, but different configs onto different regions or nodes or zones or whatever as every way you want to call it. It's really useful for that as well.
Yeah,
it's just thinking out the box a little. Sorry.
No, and that's the thing. Like if you're using ARM templates, etc., and Chocolatey, then would you recommend hosting that on Azure along with something like MyGet or Artifactory, Nexus, etc.? Obviously, would you recommend installing that there?
If you've got a lot of your infrastructure in Azure, then you could use Azure DevOps artifacts feeds as well. And they have a V2 NuGet feed that you can use within that, because that's what Chocolatey requires, is a version 2 NuGet feed. That's quite a simple package repository package feed. Very, very, very simple. But that may be enough for your needs. But if you're wanting to do more, something like Nexus Artifactory ProGet, they can actually be hosted in Azure as well. Nexus is free. Nexus is a free and a paid version. You can use a free version with Chocolatey because that provides NuGet feeds. Artifactory's NuGet feeds are paid for, so you would have to pay for that, but you get a trial. But Artifactory does a huge amount. It does Vagrant repositories. It does all sorts. I don't have any experience of ProGet, so I couldn't tell you about all the wonderful things that you can do with that. But I would recommend that you have your package repository in Azure if that's where the vast majority of your infrastructure lives.
Yeah, definitely. ProGet is just it's a NuGet package. It's just kind of paid for. That's what I used it when I was contracting. It was pretty much exactly what you'd expect from a package repository. But there's lots of free ones out there. But certainly, obviously, have a play. And Paul, you're on Twitter.
I am.
So you can be contacted for Chocolatey questions.
I can be, or we've got Getter, the Chocolatey Getter room, where people can post questions. I'm trying to think where we could put all that. excuse me, all that information. You could put it onto. There's a Reddit, subreddit as well. We have Google Groups. You'll find Chocolatey NuGet as well on Twitter. We're all available for that kind of stuff. We'll probably add that, I'd imagine, into the YouTube description. Add all those kind of links in there. But me and the Chocolatey team are more than happy to answer questions about it.
Brilliant. Well, Paul, it's been a pleasure having you on today. As always, it's fun chatting to you. Obviously, Paul and I actually live in the same town, in the same suburb. So he's only a few streets away, which is a funny one. Although saying that, I've just realised I've had 4. This is my 4th DevOps Derek Weekly, and 3 of the hosts so far have been Scottish. Next week, I'm back with Richard Hooper, Azure MVP. Obviously, we're going to be talking Azure Kubernetes service and from ops to DevOps. So, Paul, it's been a pleasure as always. Looking forward to next week. And all the best, everybody.
Bye-bye.